All right. Well, here we are, Infosec Decoded number 29, RSA. And we've got a guest today, Brandon Brown. We'll talk more about that later, talk about the Western Regional Cyber Defense. And but first, we got a few of the normal news stories, starting with this article, which got a lot of people upset this week in the security news on The Hill by Alan Gwynn, who is a college professor someplace, wrote this article that is just spectacularly counterproductive, claiming that you should never hire anybody who works at any company that ever had a single security incident, because that proves that they're all incompetent. And you should never follow any best practices because the best practices led to the current situation where everybody gets hacked. So this is, everybody's been dumping on this and screaming and yelling that this is a terrible article. And the one that I thought was most fun about it was a Twitter thread from Michelle Disraeli, who had a good discussion of an old story about airplanes. I think World War II, they would have airplanes come back and they would see where the bullet holes were in the airplanes, and they would put more armor there, and it didn't help. And it wasn't until they talked to a real mathematician who said, well, you only see the airplanes that survive. So you should patch the part that doesn't have any bullet holes in the airplanes that come back. And that's the point here. I mean, if you only, and as I think anybody that knows this should know, most companies don't have any good detection system. So if they don't have any security incidents, it's not that they've never been hacked, it's that they're so incompetent they never even noticed that they've been hacked. So if you hire the staff from those companies, you're probably getting the worst people, not the best people. Although I've had this argument with a lot of my students that get a job. I say, don't argue with the boss and say they need to change their politics or something. You're a small cog in the machine. Just do your little part and stay quiet as long as the check's clear and it's legal. Don't worry about the big issues above your pay grade. I'd say most of the staff at a company cannot be judged by the overall success of the company. They're probably doing their little job okay, or maybe badly, but that's not what made the whole company go up or down. Of course, I say that as having worked at an awful lot of collapsed and failing colleges, and I don't feel like it's my fault, so I may not be the most objective measure of these things. But anyway, it's an interesting bad take.
It's a good idea to get battle-tested people, not people who've never actually gone into the fray.
And that's what I think most people do. They just want to see experience. And like a letter of recommendation saying you did your little job and you did okay, and they don't tar you and say, well, that company got hacked 3 years later, so that means everybody there is terrible. This is a very indefensible position.
Yeah, I'd rather you made your mistakes on somebody else's dime and then learned the lessons there before you come to my org.
That's what Netflix said. We had a Netflix security guy give a guest lecture, and I said, do you want to take interns? He said, no, I don't want your interns, and I don't want your graduates. We don't touch anybody until they've been 5 years of real experience coding, because there is no program anywhere that teaches you secure coding, and there is no certification anywhere that covers it. We don't even look at anybody unless they have 5 years of real experience on the job. That's the
and how deep is that pool?
Not very deep. That's the problem,
Exactly.
Of course. But Netflix, Netflix apparently can afford to take only the experienced people and let them practice on other people's stuff. Or at least they could at that time. Anyway,
right. AWS is starting to eat some of its own dog food with that, though, because I started an AWS Academy at Coastline, and they are really starting to recruit interns out of the academies across the country to give these students some real world experience. Now, do they still grab the cream of the crop, the top line people? Oh, heck yes, they do. So they have a balance, though, and that's where we have a lack of a problem with placing students is there's not a balance across the industry.
Yes, and I think, of course, also you just need to have relatively small jobs to give them. Like what I tell students is if you get a security job at all, you're probably going to have the midnight shift watching for alerts, being a security analyst, just, like frontline help desk, where you just are told if you see these things, do this. If you see anything else, pass it up to tier 2. So I also had some of my students got jobs where they were just like, watching news reports and reformatting to go into their definition database and stuff. Something relatively dull is where you start out. Anyway, so Liz has got another ransomware issue.
Yeah, though this one's pretty big. This insurance company, they mostly provide business insurance. Probably the biggest US company that provides it. I know I buy my business insurance out of the country, but good thing I did too, because this company got hit with 40 million. They paid $40 million. The demand was higher than that. Originally, they demanded 60 million in this ransomware attack, and then they managed to negotiate down to $40 million. So it's notable in that it's one of the highest known payouts that we're aware of, and generally not a great idea to do this. They said that they followed all the regulations, which I believe, but you're setting a pretty bad precedent here.
I'm amazed that that's not very good negotiation to just get them from 60 down to 40.
No.
And also amazed I never heard of these guys, CNA Financial.
Mm-hmm. I've heard of them before. But they mostly do business insurance, like business liability and stuff like that.
That's what I figured.
But it's just hopefully they don't provide cyber insurance like my business liability provider.
Well, what I've heard is why almost everybody gets cyber insurance, and it's relatively cheap, and that's why they always pay the ransom, because the insurance company does. And I've been reading opinion pieces that say they're probably going to stop covering ransomware with cyber insurance pretty soon, because it's getting so expensive and it's so unpredictable.
Right. Also, those payouts when they are paid and covered by cyber insurance are typically far, far lower than this. I mean, and it's a bad idea. You never know who's to say that they will unlock your stuff or will even be able to. We've had incidents before where the attackers were able to lock the system, but even trying were too inept to be able to unlock the data. So that's always a possibility.
Well, from what I read, like most of them do in fact give you the keys, but the one I saw, I almost put in this list today, was one where they now encrypt it twice and demand 2 payments. You decrypt it once more. That's the thing I always wondered. That's why they say don't pay ransom, because they'll just come back and ask for more. Yep. And the ones where they steal the data and threaten to leak it, well, they could just come back in a few months and threaten to leak the same data again and demand more money.
Absolutely.
That has not happened yet, but I don't know why. It's just a pot of money sitting there waiting for them to pick it up. And I don't think criminals really think about long-term repeat customers.
No.
Anyway, all right, Irvin's got DPIX.
Yes, DPIX is a tool that can help recover passwords from pixelized screenshots. Now, it's not perfect. It can't do sRGB, I think, or RGB. But it's one of those things that they'll be developing, but it's an interesting tool to have in your pocket when dealing in a pen test.
Yeah, this is why so many people have sloppy attempts to redact information and then they're sorry.
Yep.
One of the first things I learned in security is that if you are trying to block out information on a document or something in the background, never blur it, never pixelate it. Just get go into Microsoft Paint, draw a big black box or orange box and just draw over the entire thing some solid color. It's the only way.
What's funny is that has failed so many times because people do it in PDFs and they don't realize that it's layered objects and the black box is just sitting on top of text that is still there. That's why, that's why they need to hire all of us security pros, because this stuff is harder than it looks.
Exactly.
Now, I remember I started a whole lawsuit one time when I was working at the escrow agency because they sent me a database and said, you must send this notice to these 120 people, but not to any of the 10 managers. But what they'd done is remove the managers by right-clicking on the rows in Excel and clicking hide. So they didn't appear on the page. And I ran a mail merge that picked them all up and sent it out. And next week they called, you sent it to the managers. You did the wrong thing. And I'm like, me? Well, I didn't do anything. I just did the usual stuff. And they're like, now we started a whole other lawsuit. So I told that story in class when I was teaching Excel, and one of the lawyers on that case was in my class. So anyway.
Fun.
Yeah, but they thought they had removed the data, but they had just hidden it.
Yeah, that's not removing data.
Well, we changed our procedures from then. Because of that case, we said from now on, we're not taking any data from anybody without control totals at the bottom. How many records, how many total dollars, so we can catch this problem. That's why, this guy says you have only work for companies that have never made a mistake. I say, well, that's not an option.
Right.
You're always going to make mistakes. When you do make a mistake, you should admit it and then explain how you fixed it so that won't happen again. And that's all you can do.
Yep.
Anyway, Kaitlyn's got 1 nanometer. Now this one gives me headache.
Right. Yes.
How is 1 nanometer even possible? This has got to be nuts.
Yeah. But I'm not even sure how they're calculating these numbers, because apparently what they're doing is they're not actually making the chips yet. Right. So this is theoretical technology. And what they're doing is so let me first back up a second and say that a website called hexus.net. I don't know who these people are, but I'm going to trust them for the time being. Have this article about TSMC, and they're one of the major manufacturers of chips. And apparently TSMC are saying that, oh, we are in the process of developing a 1 nanometer chip. So what does that even mean? Well, they did a research paper, and they basically figured out how to get a 0 Schottky barrier height and a contact resistance of 123 ohm micrometers, and therefore a 1 nanometer chip. It could be possible.
How big is a silicon atom?
0.111 picometers.
No.
So sorry, 111 picometers. Sorry.
No.
Yes. So it's 0.111 nanometers.
Can't be picometers.
It's 0.111 nanometers. So it's
nanometers. Okay, so 1 nanometer is about 10 atoms. Well, that's not quite as insane as I thought.
Yeah. So 111 picometers is the size of a silicon atom. I mean, but of course it differs because atoms are not, these solid balls. They're you have this tiny little center, right? And then of course most of the atom is in the electron shell, and that's kind of a fuzzy, wishy-washy thing. And so when I say 111 picometers, I'm talking about the covalent radius of the atom. So,
well, this reminds, when I was in grad school, my boss, there was a discussion about how much the iron atom moves in a heme when oxygen binds. And there was indirect evidence that had to be about 2 angstroms. And somebody did crystallography and found that it was 0.1 angstrom, 20 times smaller than it could possibly be, and published the paper. And I remember my boss took his name off that paper and said, I'm not publishing this stupid number that can't be right. And I kind of feel that way here, but
yeah,
I'm wrong. If they could really do 1 nanometer, gee, that would make chips a lot more powerful.
Yeah, we're getting to the point where, we're kind of going down a little bit, we went from, like 40 nanometers down to 20. And then of course, then we go from like 10, we're right now about 10 to 8 nanometers. And then going down to 7 is a big leap. But if we start getting down to 2, like what IBM announced, to 1, that's a huge decrease right there, from 2 to 1 nanometers. So we're really getting like, there's not much more we can do with existing materials.
I'm listening carefully for the magic words. Somebody has to say, this is the end of Moore's law. Somebody always says that.
Oh, it's never going to be the end of Moore's law. Once we get transistors that are atomically perfect, we're going to find some new atoms to use and some new structures that we can improve efficiency and start creating wormholes between.
That's when everything goes subatomic.
That's right.
And you really lose your mind.
You lose light or something. That's why my theory has been that Moore's law is a psychological law, not a material science law. It's how fast you can invent things or something. Anyway.
It's always been a psychological law. It's always been it's the speed of human progress, of human ingenuity.
Or the speed with which the aliens deliver the process to us, if you believe all the UFO reports. Anyway. So then Alan's got the FTC doing something about fake reviews. Boy, that would be nice.
Yes, it turns out that all those glowing reviews on Amazon, all those 5-star products, aren't actually 5-star products because they're full of bogus reviews. This should come as news to absolutely no one. Anyone who's bought a 5-star, maybe slightly questionable product on
Say it ain't so, Alan.
What's that?
Well,
say it ain't so.
I wouldn't say they're all fake, but some of them are fake.
Well, yeah, that's true. The 1-star reviews are definitely valid and legitimate. But the real story here is that not only is the spamming of reviews widespread, but that Amazon knew about it all along, and that they've been covering for some of these large retailers, especially electronics. I shouldn't say retailers, but brands, large electronics brands on Amazon, to the extent that some of these brands have been penalized in the past, or they've been threatened with being deplatformed. And Amazon has actually gone to the lengths of reinstating them, even though they've been clearly violating the terms and conditions of using Amazon.
Was there
And
anything in your research that suggests something nefarious, like any type of a kickback or anything like that?
well, this is not original research on my part, to be clear, but it does appear that Amazon has some financial interest in seeing these brands succeed, because in a couple of cases, MPOW and Alki, they're top 100 brands on Amazon. So, Amazon is, of course, seeing significant revenue thanks to these two brands. And whereas most brands get deplatformed if just the regular audit team discovers there's problems, in the case of these two brands, it had to be run up with a manager, a very high-level manager at Amazon, who, as it turned out, always reinstated them. So this was not a problem for a long time, but now the FTC is getting involved. The Federal Trade Commission is getting involved because obviously it's fraudulent behavior. And so now Amazon's beginning to respond to it. So we'll see what happens. Maybe some of those 5-star reviews will start to slowly become 2-star reviews.
Well, the FTC has just been declawed by the Supreme Court. I mean, I made my living as a FTC contractor for years. Their standard thing was they would take your money away and give it back to the customers you defrauded. And the Supreme Court just ruled that they don't have the authority to do that anymore. So the FTC is kind of a paper tiger right now.
I saw that. I think all 9 justices voted against the FTC too, which is very surprising.
Apparently, they didn't have the legal right, and nobody ever noticed until now. They've just been doing it.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because, well, the FTC is kind of like the organization of last resort for redress sometimes.
Well, there's the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, whatever they do. There's a variety of them, but they all seem pretty weak.
Yeah, and against Amazon, I mean, what are the odds that this will actually see some kind of meaningful, positive resolution?
You wonder if that's going to come down to the state level, because the state version, the California state version of the FTC, actually has some teeth into it. I have some experience with that. What I had happened with a second mortgage on my house, and the not the lender but the servicer was doing some really nefarious things, and I brought it up to the state level. I forget the board's name, but they had that fixed in 48 hours. I was really impressed with it.
That is impressive. 48 hours.
Yeah. They had that fixed in 40. I was like, it made my head spin.
When
I don't know who they threatened. I don't know who they put in a back room, but they fixed it.
So what's the name of the agency?
You'd ask me a hard question. I'll get that for you.
That's all right. Anyway, I think we ought to go to, let me just hand it over to Brandon Brown, who wants to talk about the competitions, and say you're from Coastline and Pomona, right?
Yeah, I'm an adjunct at Cal Poly Pomona. I'm full-time faculty at Coastline College in Fountain Valley. I work out of the Garden Grove office down there. 3 years back, we took over the Western Regional Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition from Cal Poly Pomona. So I've been running that for 3 years. The last 2 years in a virtual environment because of COVID, which has been a challenge. But I thank you first off for allowing me to come onto your podcast. I really appreciate it. I'm really enjoying myself talking about these topics. But one of the things that I wanted to talk today was about competitions and in the entire education landscape of cybersecurity, computer science, information systems, et cetera. This is one aspect that only graduates a small number of people each year. And this is at the top level, the CPTC, the National CCDC, and the big competitions. And it has really spread out quite a bit. And several of you have experience with competitions. I know Irvin's worked on a competition, the Purple Team competition. I think you've worked on that as well, Sam. And we're seeing competitions crop up all over the place, which I think is wonderful. One of the things that I'm starting to do now is I'm working on a paper where I'm categorizing them. All right. So it's kind of like putting things into perspective where you have, Major League Baseball, and then you have, Class A minor leagues, Class AA minor leagues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You have national competitions like the National Cyber League, which is great. And they have tens of thousands of students that participate in that every year. And without them, there would be a lack of knowledge sharing and a lack of learning across that entire spectrum of students. But to evangelize this has kind of been one of my later on in life quests, so to speak, because I think as students come through these programs, we really get to push them into the industry and hopefully push them towards places where they're going to make the biggest impact. Referencing your first story about businesses that succumb to ransomware. Well, what if they would have had a CCDC member who could have actually done legitimate open source threat hunting on their IT staff? Right, that those types of impactors, I don't think they are getting out there, and trying to recruit more teams and more schools and everything else into these competitions has been challenging. One of the problems that I have there is when I have approached faculty at certain, 4-year and even 2-year schools. Oh, well, we don't want to play this year because we won't win. So.
Well, I remember I've heard this many times, and I've absolutely seen it. It doesn't matter if you win. The fact that you're in that
right.
role, the students who were on our team who did not win went right into great jobs. I mean,
absolutely.
We're not. I always tell my students, we're not making you the best cybersecurity people in the world. We can't do that. We can get you up to where you can get a job.
Right. And a good job at that if you play your cards right.
Yeah.
I'm coaching the Coastline team in the SoCal Cyber Cup tomorrow. And I told them, look, you came in 7th place in the qualifier.
Yeah.
Shoot for 6th. That's good. Right? There's nothing wrong with that.
It means you're
and just try to improve.
Yeah. If you're in the game racing for the top prize,
right,
and many companies would love to have you, you're a contender.
It's not just that, but the students that compete, the one similarity that I have against all students at any level of these competitions is I learned so much doing the competition. I learned so much more than I would have learned in the classroom. I'm not taking anything away from any instructor anywhere by any means, okay? But there's only so much you can put into your content, into your curriculum, right? To teach students. And you got to pick the main parts. Well, they need to know networking. They need to know system administration. They need to know XYZ. Well, yeah, but what about all the other ancillary stuff that, would be helpful too? And they get that through the competitions more so than any other place that I have seen. And I try to encourage them to not just do the one competition or 2 competitions a year in school, but also branch out into the community. Go and play the Open CTF at DEF CON. Go and play the Open CTF at your local B-Sides or ShellCon or your local con or meetup group that they have, and network with people, because that's what the other portion of these competitions is all about. It's all about networking, getting your name out there, getting to know the people, getting to know the hiring manager or the recruiting staff at CrowdStrike or FireEye or XYZ company or wherever you want to go.
Absolutely. I mean, I kind of disrupted a guest speaker a week or so ago on one of my classes, showed up and started talking about how to improve your resume. And partway in, I put in chat, I never got a single job from my resume. All my jobs
Neither have I.
got by knowing people. Everybody, including the speaker, said, "Oh yeah, I never got a job by applying for it either." Nobody really gets a job that way. You get a job by people knowing you and saying, "Do you
Right.
know somebody?" "Oh, I know somebody." So it's personal contact. So I had a student went and volunteered to work at B-Sides. What he did was get drunk and hand out T-shirts. I said, that's not a waste of time at all. He made friends.
Yeah.
That could lead to more success than getting an A in my class. Not that I entirely recommend that, but it's not a waste of time.
No, it's not. And I tell students that, and half of them, they look at me like I'm crazy, like I'm off my gourd. But, you know, like, look, try it. Just try it. Go to, you know, one of your local DEF CON or cyber meetups in your local community. You don't have to go do a big con or anything else. And just talk to people. Find out, what is the company? What company are you at? What are they doing right now? What are you doing in cyber? How are you looking at defending your data? What products are you using? What should I be looking at? And ask questions as much as you talk to people. All right.
Yeah.
The folks at these companies love that stuff. I don't know anybody that works in cyber that doesn't love talking to students and conveying their journey. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah. So you got a competition coming up, right?
Yeah, so we have the SoCal Cyber Cup tomorrow, which is being hosted by National University. There are 3 divisions: the middle school division, the high school division, and the community college division. I think we have about 24 or so middle schools, about 50 or 60 high schools, but there's only 7 community colleges. And these are out of Imperial, San Diego, Riverside, San Bernardino, and Orange counties. So it's not even, it's the 5 lower counties of Southern California. We didn't even include Los Angeles County. But it's sponsored by an NSA grant that is being run through a consortium of schools. The lead is National University. Coastline is one of the co-sponsor schools, as is, I think, Saddleback College, and a couple of others, Riverside Community College as well. So, and I know I missed probably somebody in there. I apologize. But no, this is the first year that they've had a community college division. This is the second or third year that the cup has been run. It's extremely competitive. It is based off of a CTF type of competition, very similar to NCL for the qualifier. For the, I apologize for the background noise here. For the final, we have a kind of hybrid between that CTF and kind of a more traditional CCDC environment, although it's very small scale. I think it's only like 6 servers that they have to defend. They have a scoring engine and automated red team, which will be interesting to see how that works tomorrow. But yeah, it's fun. It's fun to get out of the director's chair and go back into coaching mode and help students kind of prepare for these things. And most of our students at Coastline are part-time students. So they get to take part in this competition, which is wonderful because they can't compete in CCDC because CCDC requires you to be a full-time student.
Yeah, big problem for us too.
Yeah. I don't know. I know very few community colleges that compete in the national CCDC umbrella. Yeah. One of the things that I've talked to the national organizers about has been, hey, start a Division II.
Yeah.
You know, start a minor league franchise team where you can have part-time players in that. The problem is organization. It takes so much of a undertaking to put on a regional cyber security competition. I mean, we are gearing up to start our planning here in August. We start up in around August when, you know, the cyber summer camp happens in Vegas. We meet up out there and we start planning WRCC-DC at that time. What scenario are we going to do? What are we looking at? We talk to industry folks who have been involved in the competition for years and years and years and years. What are you looking for? What do the students need to know? Well, you know, do they need to know Splunk? Do they need to know threat hunting? What tools are they using for threat hunting? You know, X, Y, Z. And the big one this year was SIMS, right?
Good.
And threat hunting more than anything else. And the team that won nationals this year, I think it was Central Florida. They did the best threat hunting of anybody from what I got from the National Red Team members that I talked to.
So is there a way to be a spectator and watch this competition?
Wow, that is, well, for SoCal Cyber Cup, yes, there is. I'll get you the link and I'll post it in chat here.
Yeah, I'll put it on the page.
Yeah, sure. There is a public YouTube simulcast for that. And they have some commentators. Peter Bartoli is going to be one of the commentators. He's the cyber defense coach at San Diego State. They were finalists in our region this year. He's a real colorful guy. So that'll be some great perspective. I think Dan Manson is going to be talking there as well
He's
from
done that
time to
before.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to get interviewed at around 3:00.
Well, good.
About the competition, about WRCC DC as well. So I'll give a shout out to your crew here that I was on your podcast today.
Yeah, see,
And,
I'd like to see that. I'd like this to be like football, where people watch it on TV and then people pay you millions of dollars to advertise Coca-Cola during it and stuff like that. That will really move this stuff forward.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest problems that we've had in this space has been sponsorships. Now, I've been fortunate. I've been very fortunate that I've had some long-term sponsors that have stuck with us. But when we took on the competition in 2019, we lost probably a good third of the sponsors because, it's going to a community college. No, we're not going to sponsor it.
Yeah.
What? It's still the same competition. It's still the same
Community
quality.
colleges don't really count. Yeah, I know this one.
Our
Yeah.
student team was talking about how they would happily go into competitions like a NASCAR driver, just festooned in logos. Get some corporate
Yeah.
sponsorship.
Yeah, and there's nothing against teams getting sponsorships. We've been fortunate that I think us and the Midwest region are kind of really competitive as the amount of money that we bring in every year, us and maybe Mid-Atlantic. But there are some regions that get zero in sponsorship, right? Primarily because they're locale, North Central, North Dakota, South Dakota, Idaho, not a whole lot of sponsorship up in that part of the country for cyber defense.
Yeah, well, we never did this because we don't have a marketing person on the team. Somebody has to be good at that,
Well,
And
I
that
think
kind of fault.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Liz. No, go ahead, Liz, please.
I'm just going to say, I think too, that for some companies, and I've noticed this especially at CPTC, it's a great tool for them if they're trying to recruit, the cream of the crop, and they're looking for entry level candidates. For them, it works out great for them to sponsor these competitions because it gives them a direct line.
Right. And it takes a lot of time. So CCDC has been around for like 17 years now, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And in that time, you're now seeing the folks who were in the early years, they're now in senior management at these companies.
Mm-hmm.
And I had one of my former CCDC team members from when I was a coach at Cal Poly contact me from I'll say this, a Fortune 10 company. And he said, we'd like to sponsor the regional. And, do you have a contact at national? Yeah. So we're just now getting to that point because we've been around for so long and we've survived. That's the hardest part, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That it's starting to pay off. It's starting to pay out.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're very good for the students.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But I'm going to hang around and listen to you guys because I find this just absolutely fascinating. I think you guys are providing a wonderful service. I didn't realize you were doing this twice a week. So.
Oh, yeah. We've been doing it for a while.
Yeah. So you started up in January?
Oh, well, we
February?
started a long time ago, but yeah, we just go back quite a ways. The name changed, I think, in January is all.
Maybe that's what it was. Okay.
Anyway, All right, so I got one here. This is the one that I was very excited about is RSA, because I mean, I would remember when this happened. When RSA got hacked, it was shocking because everybody trusted those RSA keys. They were about 2011, and there was no information at all. And then there was a statement that came out that said the only people that know what happened are RSA customers, and they were told they had to sign a non-disclosure agreement or they couldn't be told anything about what had happened to their company. And nobody has violated that. So we still don't know anything. And then a defense contractor got hacked after that. And rumors were that it came in through the RSA, but none of that was so clear. And so anyway, now finally, 10 years later, the non-disclosure agreements have expired. So now we finally get the story. And it is just what we all guessed. Although the thing that surprised me is the RSA tokens are like Google Authenticator. They make this semi-random number, and somewhere on the server, it knows what that number should be. And if you download Google Authenticator and put it on your server, you type in a starting seed and nobody else knows it. So there shouldn't have been anything at RSA that you could steal that would predict the tokens, but there was. And they say they did that to help customers who lose their seed. So they had a backup of everybody's seed on a server, but to protect that server, it was air gapped. So you couldn't reach it from the network, except every 15 minutes, it would connect briefly to download just a few keys, except somebody put on another system that connected it more, and that's how it got hacked. And so it's very interesting incident response reading. They talk about how one guy actually found the hack. And I really feel bad for this guy. He found them stealing the secret seeds and putting it on an FTP server in real time. And he logged in the FTP server and saw it, but he paused, just like I would have, saying, well, it's technically illegal for me to log into this server. And while he was puzzling, he went to delete it and it was already gone. And I remember, especially at this time, I had the same feeling when in 2010, when Google hacked China to steal back the stuff. I and everybody said, wait a minute, that's illegal. You aren't allowed to do any hacking back. That's just repetition of the same crime. And I think it took a while for us in the industry to understand how this works, which is that there is some legal risk in everything you do. You get a team of lawyers, you accept some risk. The risk of hacking and stealing the stuff back is less than letting them have it. But at this time, people did not understand this. Anyway, it's very interesting reading. And they did steal the secret keys, and RSA issued a weak half explanation and then told people a little more. And it's very interesting to finally see what all happened. I think we all sort of pieced this together from the hints that were out there, but now we have the details. So I was very interested to compare it to what we all sort of tried to figure out at the time. Anyway, and so another ISP getting sued.
Another FTC story.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to see Frontier get on the hook now, because they're a major provider in the Midwest and elsewhere. My parents had them for like 20 plus years, and it was horrendous service. It wasn't particularly cheap. And their uptime was terrible. They'd get their infrastructure was terrible. They'd get water inside the copper lines. Their switching stations, they even show a couple pictures of some of their infrastructure here in the article. They look like the switching. I don't know if you remember this, Sam, but I showed you a picture of the switching station we saw in Beijing the first time we went there, and it looked like a bomb had hit it, with wires hanging out of it and everything else covers off, rats' nests in it and stuff. And Frontier's infrastructure basically looks the same way. So with predictable results. So they're hitting them. They're not actually hitting them on uptime, which I wish they could, but they are hitting them where they can, which is that their advertised speeds. There was a great discrepancy between their actual speeds and their advertised speeds. Of course, they're not the only ones who pull this stunt. It's more common than not, I think, that ISPs do that. But it is good to see. It is good to see them having some sanctions. Now, again, like you said earlier, they don't really have a lot of teeth. So I'm not really sure what'll come of this, but I think it's good. I think it's good to at least start causing major legal headaches for these companies, because at the point where it becomes more of a pain in the neck to defend themselves and have to deal with this stuff constantly is the point at which it may, they may start to improve. They may start to improve either improve their honesty, which is doubtful, or improve their services.
Yeah, well, the alternative is the invisible hand of competition, which we totally do not have in the ISPs,
No.
which is the problem. I mean, if you had a
No.
choice of 3 or 4 ISPs, then that might fix it.
Well, yeah, and that's what finally fixed it for my folks. They got a small time fiber provider rolled out fiber in their area, and so it ended up being cheaper too than what Frontier was charging them for horrible service. So up until then, their only 2 options had been really terrible satellite internet or really terrible DSL. And they went with the DSL because as bad as their uptime was, it was still better than the crappy satellite option they had. Now, I can only hope that the same happens here, because I thought it was pretty ridiculous that my folks were able to get fiber in the rural Midwest before I was able to here in the Bay Area. I have a similar situation where I have a choice between super crappy DSL or super crappy cable, both at exorbitant rates with very slow speeds.
Yep.
So,
So you're on a hotspot right now, right?
What's that?
So you're on a hotspot right now, right?
I am. And you would think, being 20 minutes from San Francisco, that there would be options here, but there totally aren't. So hopefully, and one of the things mentioned in this article is part of the issue here is that all of these municipalities, and AT&T's guilty of this as well, all these municipalities have provided significant amounts of funds to the ISPs to improve their infrastructure, and they don't use it for that. Who knows where it goes, but it doesn't go towards improving their infrastructure. So, they need to be called out on that, and there ought to be some sanctions. It should be like a grant. If you don't use it for its intended purpose, you ought to have to pay it back.
That would be
But
nice.
there's no oversight. So.
Yeah. All right. Irvin's got coding as a foreign language.
Yeah, so here's a question for debate. Does coding count as a foreign language?
COBOL should
Michigan,
count.
Michigan is debating that now, of either making coding classes replace the high school requirement foreign language. The opposition actually has a good point of, hey, you need to speak in multiple languages in order to help other people, versus coding is typically in English, so that doesn't really count. But it's a good argument to have.
Well, to be fair, I do not think that computer languages count as human languages. I don't think they exercise the same part of the brain or contribute the same thing to your life, really.
What, you don't talk in COBOL with regular people?
Well, I might, but that's not really the point.
I think they do exercise the same part of your brain, but I'm not sure that I agree that they don't serve the same purpose.
I mean, if you are a Terminator, I could see the argument being made.
Yeah, I think this is more of an or than an and when it comes to planning out your high school, career. If you're going to go into IS, CS, etc., would you really want to waste 2 semesters on Latin or Spanish or something when you can? I'll take a semester of Python and a semester of C#.
Well, learning Mandarin or Cantonese along with Python might help you if you're going into IT.
Yeah, I was
That's
going to
true.
say,
Very true.
Yeah,
Good
I was going
argument.
to say, yeah, if you do a lot of physical engineering, a lot of electronical engineering, knowing Cantonese is going to help you so much.
Yeah, I think the purpose of language is different, but yeah. Anyway, then the Android vulnerability, Kaitlyn's got that one.
I do have that one. So Ars Technica has an article about 4 vulnerabilities regarding Android. Apparently there are some issues with the Qualcomm GPU and the ARM Mali GPU. Now, the article claims that these are issues with the processors themselves. This is not true. I looked at the CVEs. These are issues with the drivers. So the drivers have use after free bugs regarding the GPUs on these chips. But the issue, of course, is that if you exploit these bugs, you are getting driver level privileges on the system. So
Right.
this is really bad. So there's just another way to take over an Android device.
Well, you know, speaking of languages, they should be using Rust. And then this would not be happening.
I mean, maybe that's debatable.
Well, the whole point of Rust claims it prevents those things.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm sure there are issues with Rust we really don't know about yet because it hasn't been deployed on this large of a scale yet. We haven't made any operating systems with it. And just like when we started C, no one was saying, oh, well, you know, there's going to be these use after free bugs. No one knew about that.
Okay, but the whole point of Rust is it patches these problems of C. Anyway, we'll see. But you are correct. Rust is new.
Yeah. And the other thing too, of course, is we really don't know the performance impact this would have on an operating system. And Android in particular is, of course, supposed to run on very low-end devices.
Yeah.
So it might not even be practical.
That's true. That's true. All right. All right. And Alan's got, oh, yeah, the government program.
A government program and more ISP malfeasance.
Yeah.
There is an article in the Washington Post written by Jeffrey Fowler about a number of anecdotes from people who have qualified for the Emergency Broadband Benefit, or EBB, which is a federal program that helps defray broadband costs for consumers with certain income requirements. And the way this works is very simple. People get $50 benefit every month, and that money can be applied to purchasing broadband service from ISPs. Very straightforward, one would think. But the ISPs, and in particular Verizon, have learned the lesson that a good crisis should never go to waste. And so they're using this opportunity to upsell more expensive services to folks who qualify for this program, and then of course have to call into Verizon in order to effect this $50 discount. And of course, this Verizon doesn't need to upsell because they're getting $50 from the government no matter what, but they're doing it nevertheless because I guess it's a chance to make more money. And it seems to be very widespread too. It's not just a few bad apples among their sales reps. It seems to be a widespread practice.
Yeah. It sounds like it's probably not exactly illegal.
And probably not, no, because it's just upselling.
Yeah.
Or
But
downselling. Because the reason Verizon Wireless does this, I have some personal stake in this. About 11, 12 years ago, or maybe even further back, I got on the Friends and Family unlimited data plan, and Verizon Wireless figured out after a couple of years that they were losing money because they had people like me that were putting like 5, 6, 7, 8 people on that plan. So they're trying to still get people off of that plan to this day. And I've been a Verizon customer since like the 1990s when you carried around these things called a pager. Yeah, I'm that old. So it's really hard. Because the plan that they made, they really screwed up. They can't kick you off that plan by themselves. So they've got to try to social engineer you to kick you off of that plan. And every time I see a news story like this, that just keeps popping in my head. They're still trying to clean up after their mistakes that they made, 10 to 15 years ago.
Before that, I was working for an FTC contractor on the Sprint Friends and Family plan. And that was a pyramid scheme. And our number one focus of the FTC that year was pyramid schemes. And I was the financial guy handling the databases to pay back them all. And this is the only case we ever had where we enforced them actually paying out the pyramid scheme, because the Friends Family Planning Plan, you would get more people to sign up. And when they signed up, you'd get part of the money, and they get part of the money in a pyramid. So it got too expensive. So they canceled it. And the FTC settlement required them to make good on it. So we actually had a bank vault full of like phone cards that we mailed out to all these people as the payment. But that's the only time we actually enforced the payout of the pyramid scheme. Anyway, so then we got, we're back to me again, right? Which Dogecoin? Like I say, I'm focusing a lot on cryptocurrency these days. So Dogecoin is incredibly primitive, which is kind of funny. And it came up on Twitter, the guy that had his tweet from when he originally invented Dogecoin. They said, hey, you could like design Dogecoin and not use so much energy and it'd be better than Bitcoin. Did you think of that? And the original founder said, I made Doge in like 2 hours. I didn't consider anything, because Dogecoin was a joke. He was going to make this silly cryptocurrency that did everything wrong as a joke. And of course, nobody would ever put any real money in it. And then it turned out to be really big, and Elon Musk is pushing it. And so anyway, one thing which I thought is very nice is this real cryptographer, Hoskinson. Charles Hoskinson is one of the guys that designed Ethereum, and he has a very good video where he talks about what you should really do if you actually wanted to improve Doge, because Elon Musk says Doge, now Scott Galloway says, and he's probably right, that this is a bluff. Elon Musk said, if Doge improves, I won't make my own cryptocurrency, because of course, all the companies, Amazon's in it, the government of China is in it, the government of the US is in it, and Tesla will probably just make their own cryptocurrency. I mean, why wouldn't they? But he said, I won't do it if Doge improves enough to please me. Then I won't make a Tesla coin, which probably just means this is his cover. He can blame them because Doge is incredibly primitive and all screwed up. Of course, that was the whole point. But there is a team of developers, 4 people working part-time on Doge, that have been talking to Elon Musk. And this guy has a nice video where he talks about what you'd actually want to do to make a good cryptocurrency these days. It has moved much further. And he has like 10 scholarly research papers from computer scientists and cryptographers showing what you should do if you actually wanted to make a better cryptocurrency. And it is pretty mind-boggling. And this is just a bizarre field. The most brilliant people are earning PhDs developing ever more complicated cryptographic mechanisms to create a product that makes no sense and solves no problem and is used only for scams and crime. It's a very strange situation. I mean, the brilliant people are doing serious work on this to accomplish nothing. Anyway, so that's why I'm teaching my students about it, because there are jobs in it. For God's sake, don't invest in it. But there are jobs writing this stuff. And who am I to question the above my pay grade decision? The economy has apparently decided to jump on this stuff as if it's wonderful.
Yeah, this is crazy because this is the snake oil of our time, you know, is it not? And it's going to be really crazy when this house of cards comes crashing down. And I've been saying this since, 2011, 2012, when I first heard about Bitcoin at DEF CON and how to set up mining and everything else. I'm like, no, this is sketchy, man. And I have friends and family. Hey, should I invest in Bitcoin? Should I invest? I'm like, no, don't. If you want to get like a fraction of a Bitcoin just to say you got one, okay, fine. It's kind of like, buying one of those nostalgia coins and, at the Grand Canyon or something. But don't spend any serious money in it.
Yep. I know. Anyway, the technology is amazing. The math is wonderful, but it all makes no sense. Anyway, all right, then Liz has got hafnium. Very, very annoying of Microsoft to do this anyway.
Well, I thought this was pretty interesting in that just the speed at which this happened. So Microsoft disclosed that they had 40 days in Exchange server, and within 5 minutes, there were threat actors scanning for vulns on that. So I thought that was pretty cool in that it doesn't take long for the CVE database to get updated before folks are running scans again.
They call it hafnium exchange vulns. Now, I thought that was one of Microsoft's stupid name for a threat actor. Is that a version of Exchange or something? What is hafnium exchange?
Well, no, hafnium, I is the threat actor. It's just
Okay, that's what I thought, because I always hated Microsoft for this because they name the threat actors after metals. So when you Google, you can't find them.
yeah, it's the wording of the headline is a little odd too. So that makes it hard to understand. But no, hafnium is the threat actor.
Okay.
So
Yep.
So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then I had kind of a bonus one that I included in here that
Yeah, I thought this was pretty good.
in case there were any duplicates, because last week we talked about Skyborg and the automated fighter planes. Well, it's not just planes. It's not just the Air Force. The Navy's doing it too. They have developed some pretty sizable unmanned shipping vessels that they are now getting to travel very long distances without captains. So that's pretty interesting.
Even through the Panama Canal.
Yeah.
No, I'm surprised they allow this, considering that they screwed up the Suez Canal with that one idiot driving badly, and considering that Teslas just plow right into walls and trees. I wouldn't want to approve letting some unmanned ship drive through a canal.
Right. Well, apparently they did pretty extensive testing up and down the eastern seaboard with it ahead of time, and it did okay. I mean, they were doing sailing this thing all the way from the Gulf to Northern Virginia, which is a pretty good stretch of sea there. So it's pretty wild. We're really getting to the point where we're going to have these massive ships running with no crews and no captains, and planes flying with no crews and no captains. And
Then you can just get rid of all the humans and have the world go on without us.
Yeah. Well, and I also, when I'm reading this stuff, I'm thinking too, it's a really good thing that the DoD expanded their Hack the Pentagon scope, because you're really going to want to test this stuff pretty thoroughly.
It's going to get hacked. And then somebody will demand ransom not to plow it into a harbor in New York or something.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. And then IE. I thought IE was gone long ago.
Well, it's going to finally be gone. June 15th, 2022.
Who is using IE?
I don't know, but somebody still is, and they're going to keep that living, and Edge won't die until 29.
I thought it was gone too.
I mean,
Susan Voorhees.
Flash.
No, Susan Voorhees over in Idaho still uses it, so we got to keep it up to date until 2022. Susan Voorhees, she's a homemaker over in Idaho. She uses IE, so
Well, all right. And then we got Kaitlyn you want to make it illegal to pay the ransom.
Yeah, so I know Sam and I have discussed this before. The BBC has an article written by Joe Tidy. Ransomware, should paying hacker ransoms be illegal? So recently, during the big Colonial Pipeline hack, it came out that the owners of the pipeline paid $4 million in ransom to these people. And they didn't even use the decryptor, they didn't use the decryptor because it was too slow. So they just used the backups anyway. And I mean, the big issue, of course, is that ransomware is a profit motivated crime, right? No one would be doing any sort of ransomware, taking things hostage without that money payout. And so by paying the ransom, we're, encouraging this crime to continue to happen. If there was no payout, there would be no crime. And what puzzles me is that we're still in this, 9/11 happened a long time ago, but we're still in this, I guess, post 9/11 world where, we're, terrorism is bad. We're not going to negotiate with terrorists. But as soon as these quote unquote cyber terrorists start attacking our infrastructure and our private businesses, We're like, oh no, here's some money, here's a few $1 million, whatever. We just want to get back up and running as soon as possible. And it's like, wait, no, don't. What happened to let's not negotiate with terrorists? But of course, this creates a problem, because if you decide not to pay these cyber terrorists, essentially, then the article points out that you're creating a pretty horrific game of chicken. What do I mean by that? Well, the cyber criminals really want to get paid. And if you are going to tell them, no, I'm not going to pay you, are the cyber criminals then going to up their game? Are they going to try to make it so bad and so horrific that you have to pay them? And so it becomes an escalating issue of how badly how badly are these criminals willing to get your money? But I'm firmly on the let's stop paying these people money. There's no way we should be rewarding this type of behavior.
Certainly, the current system does not give you any incentive not to pay them. And basically, it's an irresponsible business decision not to pay them. You have to, your customers and your investors and everybody have to suffer huge loss, or you pay the ransom. That's why everybody pays them right now. Because it's the only responsible thing to do from the viewpoint of like a company CEO right now.
I wonder if there's anything the government can do regarding maybe making a commission that would, or maybe an agency that would try to help these companies out. Like if you are the victim of ransomware, like maybe come in and have all this extra support to get you back up and running again as soon as possible without paying the ransomware terrorists.
Yeah, well, there's a problem there with the military helping private companies, which they're trying to get exceptions for. And a thing that would work would be if the government, if they made it illegal to pay the ransom and the government covered your costs of rebuilding your systems, but that's essentially socialized medicine, and that's not going to fly in America either.
I don't know. I think this is one of those rare issues where both sides can come together, because we all can agree that cybercrime like this is bad. No one wants ransomware on their systems, and I think it is not a hard sell for the American people to say, hey, maybe we should be doing something about this. To the left wingers, it can be, hey, we're not going to be funding crime. To the right wingers, it's, we're creating a stronger military defense force against cybercrime, and you can get both sides together on this.
So are you running for Congress? Because if you can get both sides together on anything, then we totally need you.
Yeah. It feels that way. But I mean, there still are issues once in a while that pop up at both sides. I mean, the truth of the matter is that we're all Americans, regardless. And on 99% of the issues, we're all going to agree, believe it or not. The only problem, of course, is that our politics are hyper-focused on the 1% of issues that we can't agree on.
Yeah, certainly are. And I don't see any way out of it right away. But anyway, all right. And the last one is Simulab from Alan.
Microsoft Azure Simuland, which is an open source project from Microsoft for deploying lab environments that simulate real world attack scenarios.
Sounds great.
It does sound great. And they have only one lab up, but it's really good based on what I've just seen. I have not tried to do it myself, but the documentation is excellent. It is a bit obscure. This first lab is the Golden SAML ADFS mail access attack. But if you want to find out what that is and how it can be a devastating attack, you can, first of all, buy a Microsoft 365 E5 license, get an Azure subscription, add a custom domain to your 365 tenant, enable audit log search, configure 365 Defender security product, get a trusted CA signed SSL certificate, create an Azure storage private container, and then install Azure CLI locally. And then you are all good to go to eventually use Microsoft's provided ARM template, which will set up a very complete little network environment that you can then follow along their instructions and do this attack and defense scenario.
You made that
so this is
a
just
whole lot
one
less
lab. Yeah, I know. It sounded great at first, but then when I looked at how you actually go and do it, it's a project. It is very clearly a project, especially if you don't know Azure like me.
Yeah.
So for those who do know Azure and spend a lot of time in Azure and know Azure security intimately, then I'm sure this is just fantastic. And maybe they'll come out with other less complicated labs in the future. But at any rate, I think this is a good indication that Microsoft Azure is looking to roll out some educational materials that might be really useful for students in the future.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. These cloud-based lab environments are very good.
Yeah, yeah. And if a company like Microsoft would just like throw a few bucks into, I don't know, making this cheaper or more accessible to folks, that would be really nice too, because, you know, so doing all this preparation is not cheap.
No, it's not. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that's it for this one. This is Friday. We'll be back Monday.